storyteller would say, well, I'm going to tell a story. And the people would say, oh, good, let's have a story. And he'd say, well, there's one thing. The story has lies in it. And the people would say, ah, too bad. And he'd say, well, it's not too bad because this story has some truth in it. And they say, oh, good. And he said, yeah, but it's your job to find it. And so if this isn't the truth, you go find it. A father said to his son, if you love a maiden, you will die. And so he took his son to the bush, and the son grew up in the bush. One day, a maiden came to the bush. She came to the sun. The sun saw her. He desired her. She stayed with him a while, and he said, I like you very much. I want you to come here every day, even though my father said, if I love a maiden, I will die. And she said, if you will die because I come, then I don't wish to come, because I don't wish for you to die. And he said, no, please, come again. Come and be with me. And he begged her to come. And so the next day, she came back. And the son slept with that maiden. And he died. Now the parents of that son, they wept tears over the body of the son. But the maiden, she went into the bush to the old hunter, and she told him what had happened to the boy. And the old hunter said, this is no great problem. All we need is a lizard. And so he went and he got a lizard. He took the lizard back to where the sun was, and he made a huge pile of wood, and he made a great fire, and he put the lizard into the fire, and he said, if the lizard should burn and die in the fire, then the sun will remain dead. But if the lizard can be rescued from the flames, then the sun will live again. Now the father tried to reach into the fire and pull out the lizard, but the fire was too great and it was too hot, and the father did not succeed. So the mother tried to pull the lizard out from that fire, but she failed also. But the maiden jumped into the fire. There, she picked up the lizard and she came back out with it, and the sun came back to life. Happy ending, huh? Except for one thing. The old hunter said, there's only one thing now. If the lizard should live, the maiden must die. If the sun should kill the lizard, the maiden will live, but the mother will die. If the lizard lives, the maiden dies. If the lizard should be killed, the maiden will live, but the mother will die. And so, the question is, what would you do? Mythology always puts the third thing into the relationship. In this case, the lizard. How many, and follow your immediate image, would kill the lizard? Maiden lives, lizard dies. How many would allow the lizard to live?
What would it mean if the lizard lived?
If the lizard lives, the maiden dies.
Okay.
But killing the lizard kills the mother.
But killing the lizard kills the mother.
One only?
One only, and then the others, there's a bunch that didn't have their hands up at all.
They died.
They're lizards, huh?
No, I'd kill the hunter in the bush who set the story up that way.
You would.
Yeah.
This is the old hunter. He's been there for so long. I don't
Shit.
think he's.
I don't like his story.
I don't think he's gonna die.
I want another story.
You do. Well, there are many others, but
This one is Jim's story. He wants to know.
that's right.
What about the ones who didn't raise their hand?
I agree with Jim.
I'm sorry, what?
For me, the honest answer is I would think be passive. To be honest about it. And let things run their course.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Let the decision be made for them.
Hope that the lizard dies of natural causes.
I hope that the lizard dies of that. Like that.
They're very long-lived.
That's the trouble with these lizards.
Let's go out and find another lizard and complicate the situation.
Yeah, the cleverness ultimately doesn't work.
I noticed that you put the death of the lizard in two ways. First, you said if the young man kills the lizard, the mother will die, maybe more. And then you said if the lizard should be killed. And I'm wondering what that's about.
Yeah, no, that was inadvertent. The onus is on the son. The son has been reclaimed from death. The onus is on him to do something. Yeah. You know, the first part of the story, he essentially kills the father. I mean, he dies himself, but he kills the wish of the father. The father says, if you love a maiden, you will die. So in a sense, he's cutting the thing with the father. And then the second part of the story says that in order to continue with the maiden, he has to cut the thing with the mother. And that's why I say it's a story about relationship. By cutting that thing with the father, he gets to be with the maiden. But only in cutting the thing with the mother does he get to continue to be with the maiden. And-
Michael?
Yeah.
Yeah, that, to me, that suggests something about marriage.
Yes.
That maybe there needs to be more giving away structured into the ceremony than just daddy giving the girl away. There are other scissors that need to be employed at that point.
Maybe the mother should be killed during the ceremony.
At least scissors.
I think what it says for relationships for me is that you have to finish one relationship before you move on to another. There's got to be a clean endings of some sort.
Or you have to accept the responsibility for ending those. I mean, if he does that, it's going to be, it's a conscious act because he knows the consequences of killing the lizard. And maybe that's something. I think for myself, sometimes I've had to go through that where I've had to let go and kill things with my family. But in doing that, then I've had to accept the responsibility and the consequences of those in order to go on.
How big is the lizard? How big do you think the lizard is?
Well, could be a dragon.
The lizard, yeah, that's if it was an alchemical story, it would be a dragon.
And then that enters into the whole warrior issue of the conflict. You're going to deal with the conflict.
Yeah, if you think of the warrior as not external, yeah. And if you think of the relationship as having to go through a stage of life and death conflict, yeah. The alchemical, if you look at some of the alchemical pictures, you know, from Middle Ages and so on, they have a whole series where there's a dragon, and on one side of the dragon is a man with a club, and on the other side is a woman with a club, and they're both clubbing the dragon. That the dragon is what's between them, and it stays between them unless they mutually get into the conflict. But the conflict is really not with each other; it's with the dragon or the lizard.
And the dragon also has two parts too. It's in the alchemical. Two parts of the dragon.
Yeah. But can we keep the kind of statements we were hearing, but then work it through the story? Tony?
I just wanted to go back to what Ted said about the marriage thing, because as one who's getting married in 3 weeks, I've gone through the last 6 months of trying to kill the lizard, in a sense. So
What does that mean? What do you mean?
well, there's this thing in which it's finally time to make that separation, to say goodbye, mother, you know, and then to move into this different place with the maiden. And it's like, and it seems to me like that's it is one of the necessary parts of getting married, is that's when, you know, finally you're faced with it and you got to do the damn thing. And she's got, in a sense, it almost feels like you're in a battle. And it's like, I know what I want. I want the maiden. And I'm tired of mom. You know, and there's this aspect of it's time to kill the lizard and to move on. And so to me, that's where the story kicks in, for me anyway. And it's also significant that lizard comes out of the fire. Yeah. Because there's that passion there. And
that's the fire that was brought up earlier.
Yeah.
That you attract the woman through the fire. Mm-hmm. And it's the same fire.
And she jumps in. I mean, her whole body goes into the heat.
Into the heat of the...
If she's not willing to do that, who cares?
Yes, the heat of the fire. The fire is coming from the masculine side. It is moved from the father's systematic rule saying you can't love a maiden into the old hunter who makes the fire. And she comes to that fire.
I
Jim?
think what, for me, what's very instructive in the story is that what keeps you alive first, or one level of what keeps you alive, is the mother, which would be all mothering, nourishing, supporting, grounding, you know, all that. But that mother can't save him from the fire, whereas the maiden restores him to life, so that there's what Jung calls the anima. The anima in this part of life is what keeps him alive. The mother no longer keeps you alive. In other words, nourishment, support, those qualities are not what saves him, brings him back to life. What brings him back to life is the soul that'll leap into the fire.
Yeah, that will risk death.
Right, that'll go into the fire.
And then is in fact vulnerable to death.
Yes.
It's that serious.
Right.
But you're using the word soul now as if it were his own soul that went into the fire. Is that right?
Yeah. I'm taking it all inward now for a minute.
Yeah, and that would be the alchemical thing to do.
In other words, his need is no longer for support. His need is now for a soul that'll leap into the fire.
Yes.
And that brings him back to life. In other words, life is now given by fire, it's not given by mother.
Baptism by fire.
Yeah.
He first says...
Yeah, by passion.
He first says to her, I want you to come every day. And you get the sense of comfort and regularity and support if she comes every day. That's what he's after. That actually leads to his death. And then the only way back to life is by that moving through the fire, which then sets up a life-death situation somewhere else.
It's really a classical initiation story, an Aboriginal initiation story, with the exception that she has the choice in a sense of going back to childhood, where full initiations, I mean, that's it, you now are a man, period, in theory, anyway. But here in the story, he has the choice of either killing the lizard or not. Otherwise, it's initiation, death, resurrection, as a man with a wife, not forget the parents.
Yeah, it also could imply that if we don't kill the lizard at some point, then we continue in relationships that are basically mother relationships.
So what is not killing the lizard? That is, I mean, there's two possibilities. One, you don't develop a soul that dives into the fire. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's one possibility.
Yeah.
Secondly, you do develop a soul that dives into the fire, but then you don't kill a lizard later.
Yeah.
So what would it be like not to kill a lizard, practically, in a marriage?
Well, what I was hearing earlier was this thing about the fire. We went through it once and talking about it's not a matter of setting up the conditions to attract the woman, the soul, to bring life to our soul. It's a matter of getting in the fire, of living in the fire.
Michael,
Otherwise, all the stuff.
is living in the fire tied to the emotional body?
Yeah. Well,
But no, you see, the emotional body can also be the lizard, the sluggish and archaic that doesn't want to move. That just goes with the tropisms of temperatures and when it's warm, then you're warm. When it's cold, you're cold. Adaptive. So the lizard. I think emotional body is too big a word. I think there are too many different kinds of emotional bodies. Every animal's another kind of emotional body. This is fire. It's killing some kind of archaic inertia.
That's what killing the lizard means?
I think that's what killing the lizard would mean. That the long tail that pulls you back.
yeah.
I'd like to comment on firewalking. I've done it 7 times. And what I found was, number one, in order to do that, go into the fire, I had to literally own and literally embrace every one of my fears, every one of my strengths, and integrate all of my body states. I think it was an integration of my emotional, my physical body. If I didn't do that, I knew I would have been burned. The second thing, which was, actually, I just thought about this when you're talking about mothers, is that I shared this with my parents. And we were all, I was with my parents, my brother and sister were around, and I mentioned to them that I had done that. My mother went hysterical. My dad thought it was the neatest thing in the world. It says something to that whole myth and the symbology of it. It was very, very real. And something shifted in me, especially after the 7th walk, because there was a complete integration of my ability to move into the unknown, which is, interesting enough, the fire being the masculine, but the unknown was the feminine. And I felt that integration gave me the ability to deal with the dragon or the wizard. So somehow I think that's related for me as I'm interpreting the story here.
This rings with me too with the Heraclitus fragment, that it is death to souls to go to water, that there is a kind of first birth from the mother, which literally means breaking through the water. And then there is a second birth here that comes through fire, through the maiden.
Yeah. It strikes me that nothing does maintain loyalty to what has kept me alive this long. I think you use the word archaic initiative.
Yeah.
Inertia.
Yeah, to stay in the...
Yeah. And this just feels like a really shitty story to me, just because the thing that hit me about it is this sense of either choice is incredibly painful.
Yeah.
And that's like a really rotten place to be.
Yeah, something is going to die. Something is going to die. It
just feels somehow like the stakes of this aren't quite clear. I mean, it's nice and easy to say, and I raise my hand, I'll take the maiden, I'll take what's behind door number 2. But I know they're cooking lunch for me, and, in 20 minutes or a half hour, I'm going to be eating it and getting all that nurturing. I mean, if you're really talking about rejecting the mother, rejecting nurturing, and living in the spiritual, I mean, that can also mean literal death, in a sense. I mean, just ascending and going right back to that soul world. So it's a I think a lot tougher choice when you look at it in that way.
Wait a minute, you're saying that we're supposed to let go of the feminine? Is that what you're implying in terms of going into the
No, I'm saying that when you make that choice, you kill that you kill that lizard and you get that wonderful soul woman. Then you're killing the nurturing. You may be literally, leaving this life in a sense, because nurturing means food.
If it's taken literally, then that could happen, and it in fact does happen, especially.
But Cesar Chavez has been doing that for 39 days, and he didn't die, but he definitely rejected the mother. He had a 39-day fast.
A fast, uh-huh.
I don't think it's nurture. I think I overextended the idea of the mother there, because it's a lizard. It's a lizard, and the lizard is not a nurturing image of the mother.
No, but
It's killing the lizard aspect of the mother.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
Well, we have to imagine it.
But
I already said something about
James,
the temperature and the inertia.
James, the lizard is also, its simplest part of the being. It's a very early animal, and basically all they do is like eating shit. They're kind of big.
Oh, they're beautiful though, don't
No,
they?
yeah, they are. Just you get what I'm saying? They're not as.
We have to be very careful, because you're going to look at them through Darwin's eyes, and you're going to put them on a ladder, and you're going to have them way down at the bottom of a ladder, and that's not fair to the lizard.
No, but
you have to get the lizard's agreement to anything you say about a lizard.
Something about the story that I haven't heard mentioned yet. It's like she jumps into the fire and saves him, drags him out of the fire, and actually she's jumping into the fire and dragging the lizard out. And to me that means that it's not that she saves him, it's her willingness to face the issue that is the lizard that saves him.
Yeah,
that's
very good. And one thing I heard earlier that sounded like the lizard to me was Doug talking about incredible loneliness in the ditch. There has to be this willingness to suffer the issue. If the issue is loneliness, you get that sense of the coolness of a lizard too, a stillness. It's come up several times, as opposed to creating the situation that attracts the woman or the soul, whichever way you want to see it.
Lizards are cold-blooded too, aren't they? I mean, they are dependent on their environment. So
Right.
if it's cold outside, they're cold. If it's
We
warm
call
out-
that cold-blooded. It would be nicer to call it adaptive.
Yeah.
Adaptive is, now there's a quality.
Or accommodating.
Yeah. So one can be too accommodating, perhaps.
Yeah, and the story says if you accommodate the wishes of the mother, then you lose the maiden or the soul. And one other thing is to look at the whole maiden side of it too. But
I think we heard the lizard react in the room when some people said they'd let nature take its course, or they wouldn't take a choice, or they'd just see what happens next. I think that would be the lizard speaking.
wait on the branch.
Yeah, just
That was my question. One thing about this, for us that are muddling through this, we'd like to say, how much time do I have to make this decision? I don't know how to relate that to mythological time. Okay, and the other thing is, the image that came to my mind is this story doesn't allow anything for the Western twist, for June Cleaver to come in and be the self-sacrificing mother and her kill the lizard.
Oh, there's plenty of room for that. You can do Leave It to Beaver with it. But the issue with
There's people that would wait for that, though.
yeah. The question there was if the self-sacrificing mother coming in to kill the lizard, does she is that a root? Can she kill the lizard? Does that kill the lizard?
I don't think she has the power in this story.
I don't think the lizard's ever killed by the.
It's the appearance. It's the appearance of the killing of the lizard. It's another lizard. It's the second life of the lizard. But the thing on time is real important. In other words, the stories don't have a linear time. So the going to the bush and living under the stricture of the father that says you can't love a maiden, that can be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And the struggle with our own ability to love and to feel our own love, either directing it towards a maiden or receiving it from, depending on the particular stricture. That can be most of a lifetime.
Why does the father say that?
Well,
Isn't it also a blessing? Isn't he also saying, when you love a maiden, then the you that is my son dies.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll lose my
When you find your soul, when you move in with love to your soul, then you're no longer your father's son in under those strictures. Would that work?
Yeah.
And then if sometimes it helps to make the father the whole system. The things that were said earlier about being on fire, being in the fire of the soul, tend to be antisocial, outside of the strictures, outside of the rules of society.
But what about these men who spoke of having very intense sexual relationships without much process in them? What is happening here? I mean, are they still obeying the father? Who says, don't get connected with your soul or you'll die?
The time from when the maiden comes to the sun in the bush and when he dies could be that time. Just a repetition of the visit of the maiden before the death. Or that could be the death too.
Isn't all relationship about conflict? I mean, if you want to stay in relationship, you have to fight a dragon, you have to fight, you have to do something. I mean, it's about conflict constantly.
Yeah, this story says it's not just a matter of fighting dragons, it's a matter of killing a lizard. It makes the distinction between fighting dragons, which is the heroic thing where the fight goes on and people get to watch it and that kind of thing. It reduces it to a lizard and it says that it is killed. It has a kind of a finality to it. That's a little different for me than fighting the dragon.
How do Tim and Paul feel about this question? Do you feel that to some extent in pursuing these relationships sexually only, so to speak, that you're obeying your father in some way? Where are Tim and Paul?
Right here.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting because I was thinking about that, and again, it's this. I was just thinking about this when we broke up before. This puer thing, not committing and flying around, and this fear of getting into work is I won't be able to get the woman. If I get too much into my work, I'm not going to get the woman. I don't know if that's. It's definitely not pleasing my father because my father was a workaholic, and that's all he knew. So I don't know, maybe that's pleasing on the part of myself.
Or maybe you evade the soul, maybe your father evaded the soul by working all the time, and you evade the soul by having a whole bunch of intense relationships.
Does the father say, don't ever love a maiden or don't ever lay with a maiden?
He says if you love a maiden, you will die.
Maybe the intense, compulsive, obsessional kind of love, maybe that's just laying with, which never moves into the love and death.
Yeah, yeah.
It strikes me as having to do with vulnerability. Like when I was 8 years old and the wedding party would go by, and all us little 8-year-old guys would say, "Sucker!" And we were talking to the guy there, and at 8 years old, we didn't have any idea what that meant. So the messages we got from our fathers at that point was that, watch out, there's something really dangerous there. And I was married 3 times and divorced before I let myself get vulnerable enough to meet that fucking dragon. Really look at the lizard. I'm still looking at that lizard regular.
The bachelor party is
I got a different
the death.
question. It seems like we're moving back and forth between mythological thinking and concrete thinking. And to me, I'm losing a sense about the story. The father, really, I see as an internal father, and I see the maiden as your internal feminine, and not something that's outside of yourself, as I understand it. And not only that, but I also see a separation of soul and nurturing, which I think is wrong. And the mother becomes, I think there's some things that have fallen out of line here with our interpretation.
Why do you think that's wrong, to distinguish soul and nurture?
I don't think that what the story is trying to say is that they're at opposite ends of the pole.
I'm not quite sure what it says, but it doesn't feel like what the story's trying to say.
What do you
That-
think? What do you think?
I don't think they're about to do that.
Well,
I think that there can be more than, I think that there can be nurturing.
I don't know that. No, I want to hear a little more how you work with it when you're talking about it in the psyche.
That you think about the feminine aspect of your psyche, the mothering, the nurturing aspect of your psyche or your soul. That the soul isn't void of those qualities. And so you separate that stuff out, and I think you're doing a disservice to understanding what we're talking about in that world.
But the way the soul in this story brings life is by leaping into the fire. The word nurturing, I mean, the images of nurturing are not really in the story at all. It has to do with leaping into the fire, which the mother can't do. That's what it says.
Which is also nurturing in itself, which is saving in itself.
But nurturing is not the same thing as saving. It seems to me you're trying to hold soul and nurturing together, and you're furious here because someone is trying to pull it apart for you.
Yeah, and this is talking about the soul and the fire.
Well, okay, what I'm seeing is that they're separated, they're at opposite ends. And that's the thing that I'm reacting to.
Right. What's the matter with that?
Because I think that's limiting what is the story is trying to say about soul.
We don't know what the damn story says. I mean,
Yeah.
why do you have a personal objection to nurturing being in one place and soul in another place?
Because I see those both at the same level of working with the totality of the psyche. And when you
That's a
separate
lot of
them out,
Jungian bullshit talk. I mean, what do you really dislike about it?
He's
So
trying
like-
to say that when you're in touch with your soul, it's life-giving. So that means it's nurturing. That sounds good.
What do you guys think?
I was saying what I dislike about the story is killing the mother. But as long as killing the mother is imagined in the story and with it restricted to killing the lizard, then I have to understand what it is that of the mother that is being killed. That's one thing. And second, I have to follow what Bill Berlin said about that the mother isn't dead, the mother is now translated into the underworld and works in another way, which would follow from a life of fire. But the mother, the whole question of support comes from the underworld then, rather than from the concrete world of the lizard.
Just to come back to that a minute, I think that Blake would say that there's something in the soul that not only isn't nurturing, it doesn't even like nurturing. To rise from generation free. That word free is free of nurturing, free of the mother's caretaking.
Yet it's feminine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Are you creating nurturing?
Remember the thing that was said earlier, I'm almost afraid to say it, I think was the preface, but what I really want is a woman who, what was the word?
It's obsessed with God.
What?
Obsessed with God.
A woman who is obsessed with God. That's how we got into the fire. This is talking about that kind of love that has the obsession with God, and God's a fire and all that stuff. It's not talking, it's moved out of the milk realm. It's out of the milk. It's into the issue of fire and the lizard. It's mythological, it really is, and it's hard to stay there.
Jerry had something.
After I was divorced and remarried, my mother continued to have a picture of my first wife and I in the house. Not only in the house, but in the living room and the prized spot. This, of course, bothered my new wife considerably. And
I was lucky.
Yeah. And I would always kind of shrug it off and say, well, you know, it's her house, it's her picture, the grandkids and all this stuff. Lots of problems, you can imagine. Second men's conference, this came up. Some of the guys, Todd especially, said, you know, the only way we're going to break that is if I take the picture and actually take a hammer and splinter, throw it out. I did. I went home, finally got enough balls to do it. I'd asked her to take it down once, she didn't. told her it bothered my wife. I never said it bothered me. So finally, I went home. It was just before Thanksgiving. My folks live a distance. Drove down, went in the living room, took the goddamn picture out to the garbage can, smashed it, threw it in the garbage. My mother's still alive. She's not physically dead. Symbolically, I killed her. And I could not have a relationship with my wife until I killed her.
Yep.
And there's no question in my mind. I had to kill her.
Amazing, great story.
Amazing.
Great story.
Did she resemble a lizard in the picture?
No, but it was his lizard quality.
Yeah.
My lizard.
Didn't mention that he is like it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Robert, you were talking about the soul and nurturing. I wonder if that kind of negates the purpose of being here now, which is to have a soul, a spiritual part, in conjunction with this body. And it's that tension that we all experience now in our living, and that's why we're here. If we were meant to be in the soul, we would already be there, but we chose to be here now to deal with that tension.
Yeah, I didn't follow that, but and I'll just say this and then come back to me. You know, the word soul is used to mean that part that goes down into the dark and participates in grief and sorrow. And we all want to be in the soul there. Then another meaning of soul, which is implied in this one, is the soul or the spirit, is that part which breaks away from the milk and goes toward the fire. And that's not something we can do here, but it's something we can hear about here. Now, ask the question again. What did you ask me?
That the soul, what I'm trying to say is that the soul nourishes the body, and that having the soul in the body is our reason for being here, and produces the tension that we all experience to come here, to do this. Does that make sense?
You mean that when you have the soul in the body, it does a kind of nourishing and you don't need your mother so much?
I think that she becomes another issue.
If we're to look at the maiden as the soul, the first time the maiden comes to the son, he's in the bush as he's been told to be, and she comes. It's a gift. It also is a gift that leads to the death of the son. In order to have further contact with the soul, he has to do something. There's no more waiting, lizard-like, for the soul to come by that tree. He has to do something conscious. It has to become conscious. It has to be a decision and an act, and it has to carry all that tension up to an act.
You can't sit with it in there.
Robert, I'd like to ask you to respond to the issue of if the mother dies and that milk is no longer available, then where a man gets his milk?
If the mother dies, you mean in this story or in private life?
In the story, I got
In
it.
mythology?
In this story, it's pretty clear. The next form of nurturance comes from the old hunter through the lizard. He dies. He actually is dead, which is a pretty unnurtured state. Through the maiden, through the contact with the maiden, which we're calling the soul for now, the hunter, an older male figure that hunts things, has the information, which is that you need a lizard. He brings the lizard and the fire. So now the nurturance, or that which sustains life, or in this case reinvigorates it, is coming from the combination of the request of the maiden and the knowledge of the old hunter, and then the fire and the lizard.
Good knowledge and the maiden's courage. But courage
The
is...
maiden's request is first, I think. Now she somehow knows where to go, which is the thing about maidens.
But that's courage, it's not, or information, it's not milk.
Right. I don't think it's nurturing.
You don't think courage is
I don't
nurturing?
think it's nurturing.
Counting the soul only nurtures either.
Well, okay, I'm not sure what you mean by nurture. What I'm trying to say is the story says that life is reinvigorated now from another direction, another source.
I hear the move toward gaining a courageous partner who is able to work with fire with you as an adult. And my feeling was that the nurturance then comes partially from her, partially from in yourself, partially from working with other hunters maybe, or an older hunter.
Michael is emphasizing the ancient hunter.
That's what I don't understand.
This soul knows where the old hunter is. The old hunter knows of the necessity of the lizard and the fire. I mean, how do you say that simply? The connection through the feminine soul leads to the ancestral male energy. And it is an initiation story. It's about the movement from being, nurtured or, fed, supported, substantiated one way to being substantiated another way.
So it's replaced by male nurturance. Older male nurturance.
The problem of nurturance is, I think that's where it is screwing us up, you see, because then we're thinking about milk and so on. The story keeps us alive. The old man who tells the story and the knowledge that the old hunter has keeps you alive. You are kept alive by myths, by stories. You're not kept alive only by food or by loving compassion. In fact, there are images in Jewish mysticism where the old wise one bathes his eyes in milk, so that he sees the world through. He sees the world, or he sees all around him through compassion. So the milk itself gets transformed, if you see what I mean. Milk isn't only something that you suck from and get sweetly fed from, but milk becomes the sweetener that sweetens the world, sweetens your vision. It's a different thing. You're no longer thinking in terms of getting nurturance. Your life is given to you, your sense of life through the archaic male or the hunter or the stories. See, when we say this, the archaic male, it isn't necessarily a man or a figure. These stories are the archaic male.
So you're saying that if a person is involved in his marriage and wants too much comfort and too much connection with the mother, then he doesn't know enough stories.
That's absolutely so, yeah.
Is it possible that the old man is actually in the boy, the young man, and the maiden knows where to find that in the young man?
You can certainly do it that way.
So is the lizard, though. I suppose the lizard is getting a bum rap through all of this. Living in the North Woods, don't see many lizards, but I saw a Gila monster, a fierce motherfucker. And I'm grateful to him for being the agent of the resurrection of me, the young boy.
There's a point at which the lizard is absolutely necessary.
Right.
Absolutely necessary. Then there's the other point where what was absolutely necessary is deadly. I mean, it's a very little story, but it covers a lot of big ground. And how much time that takes in between and so on.
I don't know if we really answered his question enough, though. Do you think we
2
did?
minutes left. What was his question?
His question about what gives, if the mother is dead, what gives nurturance or milk, you see.
You mean finally?
Did we really give enough? Is that answer clear enough about story and about myth and about knowledge? Is that answer clear enough that does keep you alive?
What about the nurturance between just men? Men nurture other men.
That's not mythological. Blake would not accept that. There has to be, well, I don't want to reject it, but...
This one way to say it is that the story, there's a lot of death of family in it. Family in the sense of that simple family that nurtures, that all these politicians keep telling us is why we should elect the fuckers, The reason that your gut reacts to that is it's not trustworthy at all. We don't want leaders who are nice to their families only. That isn't it. One of the problems with the whole political current is there is no mythological passion. There's nothing being said, and they're just saying, listen, I'm one of these guys that's nice with my family. This story has, the family gets annihilated, and the tears of the mother and father don't do shit for the son.
What's the last line of the Blake thing? What have I to do with thee?
Yeah. Yeah, this is that exactly following that. He has nothing to do with them. Their tears don't revive the son.
Right.
He will stay dead. There is this fire and this whole other source of life that will bring him back in, which after he gets, he then has to act differently. After being given life back from the fire, he has to act differently. Something has to be done. There's a change. Initiation means no turning back.
Do you want to take his question to be the last one?
How I see this, the initiation is something that he does. He cannot turn back. The fire has been transforming or even transmutating. And the thing that keeps popping into my head in the last 10 minutes here is there needs to be, I believe, a distinction between nurturing and caretaking. If there's caretaking going on, there is no nurturing. There's no way to transmute. There's no way that that person would be able to come back to life. To go into nurturing or to go into the fire, he needed to have his own feminine. He needed to go into that transmutation, and he needed to get out of the caretaking mother context and into his own empowerment and have that available to him by becoming the aspects of the story you described. I think it's a distinction that needs to be made, because if it's caretaking, it's going to sabotage the whole process. There's no fire with that.
Are we ready for lunch?
Yeah.